coming, everybody. And yeah, I'm glad I'm not on the trail tonight with this snow out there. And yeah, we're going to show some slides. So there we go. Before we start talking about the pictures, and I'll try and move through them fast because we got way too many pictures and not enough time. You walk for 5.5 months, there's a lot of pictures to take. And it was amazing country. But I don't think we would have made it without so many people that were thinking of us and encouraging us and praying for us. There were times when it was downright terrifying, and we'll show some of those pictures and tell some of those stories. But yeah, it wouldn't have happened if we didn't train to start out with. So this was up on Mary's Peak, and Flip and I did multiple trips up and down on Mary's Peak all over. We'd walk with our backpacks, and we did that for many weeks to get ready. I did just thank you. Yeah, and then for people that are watching on YouTube, I know that some people are planning, so hopefully you got the link, and that's working for you. And a way that you could participate is we're going to break at 8 o'clock so people can have some of the wonderful pie that's here, and you can eat your pie at home. But if you got my phone number with the email that I sent out, so you could text me questions for the question time if you want, the people that are watching on YouTube. Okay, so we trained on Mary's Peak. Yeah, and then we had for 5.5 months, we weren't going to be eating at restaurants. We were going to be eating and carrying our own food. So we did all kinds of research. These were dried beans that we cooked. And then we tested all kinds of different meals. And Flip, you feel free to jump in anytime you want to say stuff. And then she cooked up. So we just had all kinds of meals cooked up. Is it just going on its own, or? Okay. No. Yeah. And so, yeah, go ahead. And then there was just all kinds of plans to make. So we made calendars out of where we were hoping to be when, and we weren't getting everything done we needed to here. So we just worked on that and then went south to do training hikes. Okay, go ahead. And then there's all our food and all our gear packed in the car, and we headed south. And then we did training hikes on the way down. So this was in the Mount Shasta area. It was actually snowing on us that morning. But our goal was to be able to walk 20 miles a day with our backpack. So that was a hike that we did. We did 21 miles that day. And then we got down to her sister's house, and we had all the stuff that we had to get organized for where she was going to mail it. We had dropped stuff off on our way down at different places where we knew we'd be getting to. So it's not just a matter of training your body. It's just all these logistics of where you're going to be when. And then we did this training hike with the Cahuilla Indians. And this we got to the top of Martinez Mountain. They don't know when the last Cahuilla Indian was to the top of this mountain. And so this is the chairman of one of the tribes, and he's singing creation songs in Cahuilla. It was just such an amazing time. It was like, that's going to be more special than if we make it to the Canadian border. And then we had a time around the campfire, and I don't think the videos are going to work. This won't work. But he's singing a bird song in Cahuilla. They have 169 bird songs, and we were at this spot this spring where for thousands and thousands of years the Cahuilla had lived there and camped there. And then I asked them, so everybody on the trail has a trail name. Flip already knew her trail name was going to be Wonder, because like awe and wonder, she just loves being out there. I wasn't sure what my name would be, and so I asked the Cahuillas, if you have a name, think about it. If you don't have one, it's no big deal. And they said, no, we know what it is. It's this rare animal. It's seldom seen. It doesn't need much water. It doesn't sleep much, and it can go anywhere. Your name is Pa'at, which means bighorn sheep. And so I was honored to have it, although it didn't work so great on the trail because I would say to people, there are a lot of young people on the trail, and I'd say, what's your trail name? Oh, it's Pot. Oh, you mean pot like this? And so, yeah, Pot. And, but then when they understood, they thought that was pretty cool. Okay. And then we got to the trail. That's the Mexican border right there. We started at Campo, California, the Mexican border right behind us, and we had family and friends there, and they're like, we gotta, you gotta savor this. And it's like, no, we've been training for months, and we just left them and took off hiking. And one of the things I promised Flip is she's going to be able to take a nap every day on the hike, and she didn't take a nap every day, but some days she took 2 and 3. So, so yeah. And then the reason we did this hike this year. I was a wilderness ranger on San Jacinto, which the trail goes through, and she was a backpacker. And 50 years ago, on September 8th this year, we met. And so our goal was to get to the Canadian border on September 8th. And this is the second day of the hike, Flip was treating her feet. She'd had a mole removed between toes, and they were bothering her. So that was an issue for the entire hike. When we got to camp that night, it was almost dark, and she was crying and saying, John, this is not fun. and that night, we didn't do the air mattress right, and her air mattress, the air went out of it, and we were on a slope, and we woke up early, and we just started walking, and it was just so wonderful. Yeah, we call it, you skipped a picture. Yeah, so by walking early, you just saw wildlife, you saw beautiful views. It was incredible. And then one thing that happened repeatedly on the trail was family and friends coming to meet us. So this was on the third day of the hike, and they brought up food, and they brought ice cream, and they said, what are we going to eat first, the ice cream or the food? And I said, ice cream. And then we hiked in all kinds of weather. Sometimes it was too hot, and it rained on us that third night, but it wasn't raining during the day. We camped in all kinds of terrain. This is in cactus. And you weren't camping at set-up campsites. You were just hiking, and then wherever it was, that there was a flat spot that looked like it would be good for camping. So this was just in this little gully. And we had to be careful. That's a bush right behind her with lots of thorns, so we didn't want to put holes in the tent. So you just, you didn't know where you're going to camp. And then we didn't always hike together. So this is showing she's gone around a canyon, and she's way ahead of me. And there were times we wouldn't see each other for a couple hours at a time. That's just the way people hiked, is you hiked independently. And there were rattlesnakes. That was one of 6. That's the first one of 6 that we saw. And this was hiking through grasslands, just all kinds of different country. And the permits you had to get a permit to start out. The permits are given out 50 per day from March 1st through May 31st. And so when we looked at photos of later hikers, that grass that we hiked through we started March 17th, people that started in late April or May, that grass was all dried up. So it's a different trail for everybody because they do it at different times. And the trail goes by, the trail purposely goes by really interesting scenery. So this is just this natural rock that looks like an eagle. It's called Eagle Rock. And we took lots of shadow pictures. This is our trip together. Yeah. And then there's not washing machines on the trail, so a gallon bag with some water, that was how we were getting our clothes cleaned up. And then for breakfast, we'd start out early in the morning, and then we would just stop whenever we felt hungry, or we got to a spot where there was sun shining on us that it was warm enough to stop. And then one thing about through hiking is you're doing so many miles that just mountains that are far in the distance, in just a few days, you're there or past them. And this is actually, in a sense, Flip and I met. And then people are sending boxes ahead We stopped at a little restaurant called the Paradise Valley Cafe, and here's all these boxes of hikers that are going to pick up their resupply boxes there. My mom and brother and sister met us here, so we didn't have to send a box to this spot. And then this is hiking up the trail, and this is looking out on Martinez Mountain. So at the top of that peak, in fact, I got something from Matt here. That's the top of Martinez right there. My dad's ashes are right at that spot. The spot we camped with the Kuyas is back behind over here. We started hiking from here to go over there. So this is a really important spot for me. The Coachella Valley's on the backside over here. And then we'd camp on top of ridges sometimes. So this is a view out to the west from a campsite. And then the next photo is a view to the east looking down in the Coachella Valley. Okay. And then this is our first patch of snow. For the entire hike, we walked, in the Sierras, we walked in snow where we needed microspikes for 31 consecutive trail days. Over the entire hike, we hiked in snow for over 40 days. That first spot where Flip was walking, there was actually a young man that died there in 2020. He slipped on snow. He didn't have microspikes. This year, we know of 2 young people that died on the trail, so it is dangerous. Yeah, and then the trail's not completely cleared of trees in some spots, so here we had to crawl under a tree, and you can see there was a huge drop-off right below there. I hiked faster than Flip, so I carried a saw with me. Because I was a ranger in the past, trail maintenance was important to me, so this is the before photo, and then the after photo. I cut the tree away. And this is Idlewild, the town we lived in. Our youngest daughter was born there. That's the lights of that city. We started early in the morning. And we were going to go to the peak of San Jacinto, but there was a storm coming, so we were racing the storm. And so we came to the boundary between the San Jacinto Wilderness of the Forest Service. So I spent 8 summers as a wilderness ranger with the Forest Service. And then I was 7 summers before that working for the state park. And that's where I met Flip when I was a ranger with the state park. And so we camped. We made it through several big patches of snow, and the storm was going to come that next day. And I told Flip, we got to keep going. We got to keep going. But we'd already done however many miles. At the end of the day, she said, John, I can't go any farther. So we set up our tent, and then the wind from the storm came, and it was blowing so hard. We woke up at 1-something in the morning. By 2, we were walking. And so we just hiked down the mountain. We had 17 miles to go down to I-10. We passed the 200-mile mark and got down to the bottom. The clouds are starting to form up on top of the peak. And we got down, and it did start raining right as we got to the bottom, and rained that night. That was the railroad tracks. We're underneath I-10, right above us. And there were 4 hikers right underneath it, 4 young people, and they see these old people coming. It's before noon, and how far do you guys hike today? And we said, we've gone 17 miles, and their mouths just kind of dropped. And then we said, we started at 2 o'clock this morning. And so this is a few days later. This is looking at the Whitewater Canyon, and we're having lunch, just looking out of the view. And Flip carried an umbrella. We actually both had umbrellas. She used hers in the heat. I had it for rain, and I didn't use it until the last week. I just had it a little bit. But this really made a difference for her with the heat. I grew up in the desert, so I did fine with it. And we slept on these inflatable pads. We finally learned so that the air wouldn't leak out of them. Go ahead. And somebody had painted on a rock, we can do hard things. And that was our motto for the entire hike. Oftentimes we would just look at each other and say, we can do hard things. And the other people fed off of this as well. When I got to the border in Canada, somebody wrote, we can do hard things. Yeah, that was one of the hard things, was the blisters. And actually there was a whole bunch more of the blister that was covered by her hand. But she popped it, and we dressed it, and we walked a bunch more miles. And I know a lot of the plants. I used to own a native plant nursery and then a seed business. So this is miner's lettuce. So we didn't have greens, and this is very tasty and edible. So we ate lots of miner's lettuce and taught lots of other hikers they could be eating this as well. It's really quite tasty. And then I've got photos thrown in here and there of some of the different flowers we saw. This is a poppy. It's a bush poppy. And this is dropping into Cajon Pass. We're going to go by the peaks in a few days that are up on the other side. And then Flip's sister, Ellie, is the one that we left all those supplies with. So we would tell her, okay, we're going to need food for 6 days, for 9 days, for however many days, and mail it to such and such a place. Her son came to visit us, so that was pretty special getting to see them. This is up on Mount Baden-Powell, a day that we had realized we didn't count right on how many miles there were, and so we didn't have enough food, and we realized we got to do more miles than we thought, and then the snow slowed us down. And we did most of the time we were on trails, but occasionally we had to walk on the road. This was where there was a trail was closed because of an endangered frog. And this was a spot where a storm came. It wasn't raining, but it was blowing so hard, and it was clouds, so the moisture was condensing on the needles. So anywhere you walked under a pine tree or conifer, it was raining just from condensation, and the trail was dry where there wasn't trees. We did 25 miles that day, and there was no campsite, and it was getting dark. And I said, Flip, I can widen the trail right here. Is this okay to camp? So that's where we camped, right in the middle of the trail. And she woke up in the night, and she said, John, somebody's coming. I see a light. And it was the full moon. So, yeah, and then this is hiking down to Acton, and I don't know if you can see it, but the trail is ahead of us there, right in this area. The trail's through here. We got down towards the bottom, and people were able to track us with a Garmin device, a GPS device, so they knew where we were on the trail. We were a mile and a half from the bottom, and then we see these 2 day hikers, and this guy says, "They let you hike here too?" And then I realized it was my cousin Kelly and his wife, and they knew exactly where we were, and they said, "Hey, you want to spend the night with us?" So we spent 2 nights with them, and they fed us. And, yeah. Yeah, they're not in there. No. That was another flower. And then just showing a picture using the phone. We would have cell contact now and then, so I was able to keep track, send out emails and texts to people. And then the phone was also really important. There was an app on the phone that told us where water would be, where campsites might be, lots of important information. When we went through the Sierras, we would lose track of the trail where it was covered with snow, and it had a GPS part to it, so we could see, the trail's to the left or the right. So that phone part was super important. Yeah, and then Flip is a singer, so the acoustics were fantastic underneath this tunnel.
The rising morning praise rejoice, ye lights of evening find a voice. Oh.
Yeah, we'll do it again because I do want it. There are some other times I want you to hear the sound. So this is actually supposed to block the trail from motorcycles or mountain bikes, but you can see they just went right around the side of it. And a view from one of our campsites. And then flowers that are along the trail, lots of different kinds of flowers. This is actually on Good Friday, so we're camped up here. The moon is showing up above the ridge there. And then that's next day. It was just all foggy and super wet, but just so beautiful. We just loved hiking through there. And this is the end of our first month of hiking. We walked 502 miles in a month for our first month. And then this is Easter sunrise. And actually right before that photo was taken, there was Vandenberg Air Force had just, not the Air Force, but from Vandenberg, a SpaceX missile had just gone up. So we saw this amazing light show from that. Looking out over the Mojave Desert towards Tehachapi. And then occasionally we'd meet other hikers. people that we'd pass or that they would pass us. And this was a guy that was hiking southbound. So most people hike north to Canada, but this guy was doing what's called section hiking. He was just doing pieces here and there. So he had hiked the Appalachian Trail last year, and now he was hiking the parts of the Pacific Crest Trail. And then another beautiful flower. And another shadow. We're walking on top of an aqueduct here. For 20 miles, it was just a road walk along this aqueduct. And we camped under these Joshua trees. This was taken at 3-something in the morning when we got up because it was going to be so hot. We just hiked early. This is the desert primrose and the sunrise walking along the aqueduct and a type of Mariposa lily. And then the walking through the wind farms was pretty amazing, and we realized they put those there for a reason. And it was super windy hiking through there, yeah. And we got up at Tehachapi. These were good friends of ours. We'd gone to church with them down in Idyllwild when we lived there. And the Flip speech, she had athlete's foot really bad when we got to that place, and so that they were able to point her in the right direction to get her feet taken care of. And then the storm came, and it was going to be snowing, and we said, can we stay another day or so? So we stayed, and then hikers that we knew sent pictures of them with 4 inches and 6 inches of snow on top of their tents. So we were so glad for these special friends. And this is the footprints of the people that had walked in the snow. It snow melted, and it got all muddy, and they were just slip sliding. They said it was just horrible. So we were fortunate. And some of the lichen on the rocks. There was just so much beauty on the trail. It was incredible. And, like I said, this is just some natural formation. A lot of times we just say the joy of creation. How does something like that happen? Yeah, and in fact, creation, this is in the middle of nowhere. There's private property there, and somebody put up a sign, it's meant for PCT hikers, because there's nobody else up there but a few people. Flip and I had different takes on that. It's like, is that really appropriate? Are people going to take that in the right way or not? I don't know. And this was the next day, some PCT hiker, their message was dance. And this was our first view of the Sierras. You really can't see it in the picture, but far out there in the distance, there's a peak that's got some snow on it. And we were a little nervous about the Sierras because we knew there was still snow we were going to have to go through. And one of her breasts breaks under a Joshua tree. And we put this picture in. It says 1,000 kilometers, and half of the PCT hikers were international people from other countries, just multitude. Lots of Germans, quite a few from the Netherlands, but people from all over the world. So that was really special, getting to know people. In fact, there may be some watching on YouTube right now. And this was one of our rattlesnakes. That guy was in the trail and wouldn't move, and Flip said, no, the trail belongs to us, and she picked up a stick to throw at it, and eventually we walked around the side because it wasn't moving. And just past that was this guy. His name is Devilfish. He's not hiking the trail, but he hiked the trail in 2014 and realized that water is a huge issue there. You would have a 47-mile water carry through a hot part of the desert. So he leaves Washington, D.C. and comes out for the hiking season. He maintains 2 water caches down here. And then when people get through here, he moves up to Oregon, and there were 2 more that he did up in Oregon. The guy was amazing. Yeah. And then hiking through Pinyon Forest, I had no idea that there were thousands and thousands of acres of pinyon pine forest. And then when we would get off the trail, this is in Ridgecrest, so if there wasn't a place to camp, we'd be staying in a motel. So we'd stay here and work on our photo albums and then go to the store and get resupply stuff. And then eat as much as we could at restaurants to try and fill up because we were losing a lot of weight. And often we had to hitchhike into town, and this is trying to get back to the trail. And then once we were back on the trail, this photo is to show right there are 3 pieces of obsidian. So this is right at a pass, and obviously, Native Americans had been here for centuries, so the PCT was not a trail that was constructed for people that get to Canada. It was a trail that was following ancient trails, so that was pretty cool. I found obsidian in lots of different places. I called this Richter Rock. It's balanced right on this rock, and I was ready to take a photo. If there was an earthquake, you know it would be wobbling. And then this is our first real view of the Sierras. They're right there, and we're going to be there in a couple of days. And it's like, there's so much snow there, and we'd already been slowing down some because we didn't want to. We were so excited because we'd hiked in the Sierras, but only in the summertime, and we were really frightened about how we're going to do in the snow. We'd hang our stuff up at night to keep critters, bears, and other animals from eating it. A bear could have gotten that one, but we weren't too worried about bears right there. And then we decided we better buy some ice axes because we could tell from the far out app that snow was going to be an issue in some of the passes. So Flip got a few lessons on how to use an ice axe. And she ended up buying a new backpack because that one she was using was just hurting her too much. We were carrying more weight than that other backpack had been designed for. Flip and I lived in Haiti for 4.5 years. This guy had been in the military in Haiti, so we just had all kinds of stories to share with each other. And then this is when we're leaving. On May 5th, we left the Sierra, so we were in the early. There were people a couple weeks ahead of us, but most of the people didn't start into the Sierras until mid-May or so. So we're heading in the Sierras early. And this is a view of Mount Whitney. We didn't make it to Mount Whitney because we knew that a storm was coming, so we were disappointed, but we didn't go to the top of it. And we learned a lot about clouds. That's a lenticular cloud in the distance there. And when there's a lenticular cloud, there's wind coming and probably some precipitation. And we called it the Pacific Crest Obstacle Course. There were a lot of trees that we went under, over, around. And we did a lot of stream crossings. This one I included because we got lost at this point. We didn't realize the trail was going to go for almost a mile down the creek. We thought it was going to cross the creek. And I was ahead of Flip. And I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and get water. She said, okay, I'll catch up with you. And then she didn't find me. And she thought I must have missed him somehow. So she walked back. I finished getting water. Where's Flip? I go back. And she's standing quite a ways up there going, coo-coo-coo. Because that was our call to each other. And we were glad we found each other. Yeah. And then we had some fun photos we took where there was an opportunity. Yeah. And this was at Crabtree Meadows right below. This was on Mother's Day right below Mount Whitney. And we didn't see anybody that entire day. That was the only day where we never saw anybody. There were days that we were just seeing one or two people. And this is what we're going to be walking into the next day. And that's what the clouds looked like. And that's why we're glad we didn't go up Mount Whitney. If you see clouds like that, head home, because this was bad news. It got down to 12 degrees that night. The guy that was helping us out knew the weather forecast, and he was sending texts to our family, and they were all praying for us because his forecast said it was going to get to 8 degrees. We hadn't seen anybody the day before. We knew a storm was coming. We gathered firewood. We were ready. We had enough food. We didn't know what was going to happen. And we woke up in the morning, and we didn't know what to do. And you can see how cold it got. That was water flowing the day before, and now it's just solid ice. But when we woke up, there was this young guy that we had met a few days earlier. He was in short pants. The wind is blowing so hard it almost blow you off your feet. And he says, I'm going to the pass. And we said, okay, we're coming too. And this is the trail. That's switchbacks going up Forester Pass. And the wind is blowing so hard. I mean, it was terrifying. And then I missed the picture because my gloves, it was so cold, and I couldn't get a picture with my gloves on. And so there's a 200-foot drop-off right below that. And we ran ice axes into that snow. We were standing on about a 2-inch ledge of rock that we stood on. That was the part of the trail that was uncovered. And then ice axed our way across that to get, that's a frozen lake down below us. And then once you get to the top, it's really snow on the north side. You got to go down all this snow. And we were all by ourselves. Flip was a lot slower than me. That's her up in the top up there. Yeah, she did not want to slip and slide down. Yeah, later on she glissaded down, and it was so cold our water was frozen. So she's using the trekking poles to try and break the crust of ice so we can get a drink because we're thirsty. And we had every bit of clothes that we had with us on, she needed a nap. I found a spot out of the wind, and it was 20 degrees right now, but she was warm enough with the sun shining on her. And then this was a log that we crossed over. You can see the ice underneath it. It was just so bitter cold that day. And then we ended up camping. And if this one video. It snowed a little bit that night.
Pixie dust for Ellie.
It was so incredibly beautiful. Several hours with just all this bits of ice with snow, with sunlight on it blowing in the wind.
Pixie dust for Ellie.
And we're going to hike over Kearsarge Pass and go down for a resupply. So we got up to this point. We'd been down below there, and there was a couple from Switzerland, and this guy named Snowplow. We hadn't met him before, but he says, this place is the kind of place that makes you cry in 2 ways. It's so hard, and it's so beautiful. And we totally understood what he meant. Yeah. And then we got to the bottom of the trail. Flip is this amazing mother and grandmother, and I saw this little kid with a little book, and so she read this book to him. And it was good medicine for Flip. And the mother of the group is videotaping this whole thing because they were just so amazed at these old people hiking the trail. And this is how we'd get a box. This was in Independence, so that's what our resupply boxes look like. Now we're back on the trail, and this shows you coming down Glen Pass. What it's like hiking down in the snow, just slowly and carefully. You don't want to.
Which way did you go?
I went across.
And that's a little piker right there. Just looks like a rock. Yeah, so we didn't see them very often, but that was one of the pikas that we saw. And that's the pass that we just came over. So no, there's nobody on it. We were by ourselves. Yeah. And this shows how we did our food. So we had this dehydrated food, and then we had it divided up, and then we just poured in, add water to it, and then later in the day it would be soft enough to eat. That's eating it. And we had a stream crossing we had to do right out of this. Most of the time we camp by ourselves. This is one of the times when we camp by some other people. And most of the times when you camp by other people, everybody's so tired they just got in their tent and they were in bed, so there wasn't a whole lot of visiting. And then this is coming up over Pinchot Pass. And then the next day we did Mather Pass. That was the night, it was a Sunday night that there was a total eclipse of the moon. So it was so beautiful. And we would start really early in the mornings because the post holing was an issue. I didn't mention it, but at Forester Pass, there was a guy we met later that went over Forester Pass in the afternoon when you'd sink into the snow. And he slipped in. He would say, I fell into my waist, and then he put his hand up to his sternum, and he cut his rear end open so bad that he almost bled to death. He said he looked up behind him, and there's just this trail of red behind him. He made it all the way to Onion Valley, which is the trailhead at Independence, and he collapsed in the parking lot. Somebody called 911, and they got him to Bishop and told him he was an hour away from being dead. He took 19 days off the trail and then started hiking again. That's when we met him. Yeah, so we're heading up Mather Pass, and Mather Pass was the one that Far Out app just said, this is the one that's going to scare you to death. It's really dangerous. And Flip was going, there's no dead bodies at the bottom. It'll be fine. And so this is the approach. So it shows the view that we saw from there. And so we had to traverse across this big stretch of snow, which wasn't too bad. Flip didn't like that spot so bad, but it wasn't actually that bad. There were tracks to follow. Yeah, go ahead. And then this is where Flip is so tired by this point. And this video clip is like, do I send this to the daughters?
Yep.
Because they have no idea Mom is risking her life. And when she got to the top, in fact, she yelled this to me after I stopped the video. I'm just going to stay alive so I can see my daughters again. Yeah, and then there's two young women behind us.
Am I coming towards you?
One from
Yep.
Texas and one from Bend. And so we became friends with them. And it was so just elated you so much that you actually survived this thing. And then it was so incredibly beautiful. So I was actually singing my Climb the Mountain song at the top of this. And yeah, so this is Moonbeam from Bend is right here, and an old lady from France is right here. Okay. Yeah, that's old lady right there. Yeah. Yeah. So we crossed a number of passes for them. And this is looking down the other side, and we had to stop a little bit to take it all in, but you couldn't stay long because we still had another pass we had to get to for the next day. They took a picture of us at the top of Mather looking back to the south. And then to the left of our footpath, or the footprints that we were following, is a coyote footprint. So there was a coyote that had actually walked over the pass, and it went for like 10 miles. We were still seeing those coyote tracks along the trail. I don't know how big a territory they have, but it's huge. And getting water from a little spring alongside the trail. We used a water filter in places, but where it was coming out under snow or right out of the ground, we didn't use a water filter. And there's a friendly marmot there. I think they must get lonely in the wintertime because they wanted to be there right with you. Yeah. There's a couple more pictures of marmots, but there's a lot more we're not showing you. And then just the incredible scenery that we walked through was so amazing. And like this day we saw Moonbeam and Old Lady. That's the only people we saw the whole day. And then I'm looking at a view that you'll see next. It's glacially carved out valleys. Yeah, just incredible. So once we get lower, we weren't in snow, but then we'd hike back up to the next pass and be in snow. There's another marmot. Yeah. And then this trail, just amazing trail building to get you back down to the lower elevation. Incredible how they built the trails. And then, I don't know if this... Pretty amazing. And then the views, this is hiking up towards Muir Pass. Just amazing scenery, all glacially carved stuff, and waterfalls. This is another one that was so noisy and so beautiful. And then speaking of post holing, this day we walked in the snow from 9 in the morning until 8 o'clock that night. And so we did post hole, and this is where Flip had fallen into her waist, and she's digging her shoes out of the ground. Fortunately, there were two other guys in front of us that were fast hikers, and we could, by their tracks, we knew where not to step because they had fallen in, or we could follow where they hadn't fallen in. We just put our footprints right on top of theirs. And that's digging herself out another time. Yeah, it was we were tired. And then this is the video going up to the top of Muir Pass. We've been there a couple times in the summer. It's an amazing spot. You can see YouTube videos of PCT hikers who are there in the snow. Oh, we'll never do that. Here we were. Snow all around. We got to stop right here. I said, look, we don't have enough food to stop. We have to keep walking. So we walked another 6 miles after that. Yeah, this is in middle of May. Yeah. This is Flip is singing inside the acoustics. When we were here with our daughters in the summertime, they sang in here. It's just so beautiful. And a stream crossing down lower. And then we're camped up this Evolution Lake that's frozen in the distance there. And go to the next photo. And I told Flip I'm going to take one more picture right as the last sun. It looks like it's lighter than it is. It's almost to get dark. And it looked like there was something out on the water. Okay, do the next picture. And it was a coyote out hunting on the frozen lake. That was so amazing. And then once it did get totally dark, this coyote and probably its mate that had pups in the den were just howling back and forth like, where's the food? We're starving to death. It was pretty amazing. Yeah, and then hiking down the next day. It's so pretty. And then we got, this is a video. Across the stream coming out of Evolution Valley. That water is really cold. Yeah. And then for those of you who don't know, Flip's name is Florence, so that's what that photo is about. And then the next picture, as we did all that snow over Mather Pass, I knew you're supposed to wear sunglasses when you hike in the snow, but I couldn't see good to follow the footprints, and so on the earlier passes, I didn't wear sunglasses, and it wasn't a problem. But this little voice said, this is the day you bought the sunglasses for, and I didn't listen to it. And that night where we saw the coyote, as soon as I closed my eyes, it was like they were on fire. And I hardly slept. I was in so much pain. So I'm taking a nap that day. Yeah, and the pain went away in one eye by the next morning, and then the next morning after that, I was okay. Yeah, it was, you wear your sunglasses in the snow. And this was crossing a creek to go up to Selden Pass, starting early in the morning before the snow is going to be soft. And then just the amazing scenery of reflections on the lake and frozen water in the next picture. Yeah, it was so pretty. It was cold, but when you're walking, you're not really feeling the cold. And we had a quilt that we shared together, so we stayed warm enough. So the snow melting, this trail was just a creek. So this next series of photos is just going to show a bunch of logs that were along the side of the trail. So most of the times we really didn't like the logs, but this time Flip is just leapfrogging from one log to another. You can just go through all the pictures there. Yeah, the trail's in the water right there, and now she's walking on the logs to avoid all the water. So people were wondering why we didn't get that many miles in the Sierras. It's because it was slow going. This is 3 o'clock in the morning. We'd already hiked a mile when we got to this spot. And normally the Far Out app would say, okay, go to a log and you'll cross at a certain spot. This one, there was no mention of a log. So we started through the water. We're holding hands. And we got partway through, and I said, Flip, go back. I'm losing my grip. Then we looked for another log. We couldn't find one. We went through farther down where it was a little flatter. I mean, there was a steep drop-off out of the picture right there, and I lost my grip again. And Flip, go back. And now we're just freezing cold. We're all wet. We had been in water to our waist. We went way down and found a log. Finally, we were able to get across it. The old lady and Moonbeam were up there, so we showed them. Old lady ended up falling in the water. But she was able to grab the log and make it across. And this is Silver Falls. So beautiful, so loud, so incredible. That was right as before the sun was coming up. We still had our headlamps on. And Devil's Post Pile. And a little video of our shadows walking along on the way up the mountain. We did 23 miles that day, and then we got in. We'd been 9 days out on the trail, so we'd lost a lot of weight. And Flip ate all of that, and then had pie and ice cream afterwards. And The waitress said, "Whoa, I've never seen a woman eat like that before." That's another flower. This one's called steer's head. And frozen waters. It's so pretty in the morning sun. And if you could play this
This is the sound of water.
and then crossing the stream later with the Moonbeam, an old lady, and another woman named Azul that was walking with them. I found an arrowhead right above that spot as well. Yeah, her name is Lorraine. Yeah, yeah. She was not an old lady. I don't know why they called her old lady. She's from Paris. Yeah. Flip crossing over some water and by Tuolumne Meadows. It was raining that day. A couple stream pictures. And then the next one is me throwing a log in the water. This one was the trail would get so wet, people would just walk to the side of it, and it looks like a bunch of motorcycle tracks, and just the reflection and the beauty in the morning, and some more natural art. That's not, somebody didn't paint that. That's just God's beauty along the trail. This one, we're walking late in the day, we're exhausted, and there's this steep slope. And if you slipped, you're just going down in this rushing river. Flip did not like that, and most of the other hikers we talked to didn't like that either. And this was the one night that we almost camped on snow, but we finally got to a spot there was a little clearing. Flip was still taking care of her feet and hiking in the frozen trail. And this was...
I do! Bravo, sir! Golly, that's amazing. I do.
And then we made it, the 1,000-mile mark was right after that. We were not good at taking selfies, but that was the best one we got. Flip almost got in the picture. That's a little before Sonora Pass. Where the map, where Sonora Pass is down below Truckee and below Lake Tahoe. Yeah, that pass you'd go to Bridgeport is from that pass. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so then there were just these amazing, so we camped up on top of Sonora Pass is what we're going to cross the next day, and we're going to have a resupply day. So we camped up on top of this ridge. We knew it'd be really cold, but it was so beautiful up there, just incredible. The trail's going to be on that diagonal to the left. Yeah, that's the next morning. We just felt like we were on the top of the world. And this is the official end of the Sierras, but we still had lots more mountains and lots more snow after this. And the three women that we were hiking with off and on, they're right there. So that just shows you how big the mountains are there. And we thought that was going to be the last of the snow. There were some pretty flowers, and it was just a lot of open ground. But then we got to this spot, and it's like, what? We have to do this? And it was so steep. And I was going to the side on some rock, but it was talus slope, and Flip said, John, I can't do this. And so she just slid down. You can't see it, but way up above is where she started, and she just slid down. And the horror stories that other hikers had about coming down here. And as I'm walking down, I picked up 3 different items that had fallen off of people's packs. Yeah, it was terrifying.
And so I slip in the snow really easy. So I told myself, if ever I slip and fall, I'm going to slide now. And that's what I do.
Yeah, fortunately, there are no rocks down below her. And the next picture that's coming up, she had just sprained her ankle. And she sprained it so bad she was just crying in pain. I heard this yell and thought she was yelling to the hiker behind us, but she was just yelling in pain. And she's such a woman of faith. And we're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's days to anybody. She just got up and started praying, and by the end of the day, there was no swelling, and she did fine. Yeah. And then some of the flocks, it was varied colors, but here's one where they're both colors right together. Usually it was different. And then Flip is in this photo just again to show you. She's right there. The trail's going across there, and she's right there. So it's big country. Yeah, and then this is a spot where it was super slick and icy. We didn't have our ice axes anymore, but we fortunately still had our micro spikes. The next pictures will show what would happen if we'd slipped. We walked right there is where the trail is, and it would not have been good slipping. Yeah, there was the guy that had fallen in and cut his rear end open, Optimus Prime. He had walked through right before us, and so he said, "You guys be careful." Yeah. And then this is past South Lake Tahoe. We're walking by Aloha Lake and these icebergs in the lake. Yeah, go ahead. And then this is Half Moon Lake right before we camped right by Dick's Pass, and that's an eagle flying right there. We saw 4 different eagles along the hike. And just the sunrise view. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And a lot of times birds would just fly out of the ground, and I knew from having been a ranger that meant there was a bird nest around. So this is an Oregon junco and 4 eggs in the nest. And then the just beautiful reflections along different water spots. You can keep moving. Yeah. And then this day the trail was flat and the snow was melting, so you just had to walk through the water for a lot. But at least we were early enough the mosquitoes weren't bad. This is looking at Lake Tahoe, camp early in the morning, getting up to go. And that's one of the times Flip fell. And I'm sure part of the reason she's still having problems with her is because she slipped so many times. And this is heading towards Mount Anderson. And my brother following us on Garmin said, "You just walked by Mount Anderson and you didn't climb to the top." Well, he didn't know the wind was blowing so hard there, and we still had a lot of miles to go. And these are people passing out Trail Magic. They had hiked the trail the year before, all but the last 100 miles. And so they knew how special it was to have fruit, and they had watermelon and peaches, and we're hiking southbound and passing it out. This is a guy named from Israel named Nir that we've made friends with. And Flip was, this was a day hiker, and these women would say, "Oh, wow, you're hiking it. Someday I want to hike the trail too." And we want to show this video, and if we can do the sound on this one. Flip, we have permission from Flip to watch.
Woochie woochie. You really did this, huh?
Yeah, no problem at all. No spikes. It did fine. I put the camera down. So, yeah. She got up and kept walking.
Woochie.
Yeah, more penstemon flowers. And go ahead. Yeah, so we came, this is I-80, and Far Out said, "It's not very deep right here, but it's going to get waist deep if you go under it, and it's going to be super cold. And so we decided to go around it and walked along the freeway for about 1.5 miles and then walked under the freeway. And there we met all these day hikers that saw all these two old people hiking the PCT. And they, can we take your picture? Can we be in a picture with you? Here's some cookies. And it's like we were celebrities. We're still in California. What time is it? Yeah. 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 Anybody want pie? All right. We'll get back after some pie. And if you want to ask questions, come on up and ask me some questions. Okay, here we go again. So after we, this is north of Truckee, and it started raining, and we got wet. And in fact, you had to cross through water to get to a bridge. So that's not a good sign. And yeah, we flipped the umbrella. She couldn't use the umbrella when she was walking because the wind was blowing so hard. And yeah, let's do this. And then we got passed by search and rescue because somebody had sent off an alarm that they had hypothermia. So it really was a treacherous day. And then the next day I slipped on a rock and cut my hand open and then hit a rock with the side of my face. So fortunately I didn't get hurt worse than I did. We're drying ourselves out in Sierra City, and some more of the onions that are along the trail. On my 71st birthday, Chairman Thomas, he's the guy that was singing songs on top of Martinez. He had meetings in Sacramento, and he did a 4-hour ride up to my cousin that we were staying with to say hello to us. So that was pretty special. And now we're in Northern California, and we're just about back up. We're just about to hike through hundreds of miles of burn area. So that's Mount Lassen in the distance. Yeah, that's a reflection right there. So that's Mount Lassen, and 87% of Lassen burned in the fire. But that fire that burnt Mount Lassen started here and burnt to the other side of Mount Lassen. So it's hundreds of miles of burn. Yeah, it's a beautiful reflection along the trail. And then this is the next day dropping into the Feather River. This is the Dixie Fire that burnt almost 1 million acres in 2021. And it burnt this bridge, and it was a super hot day, and we learned the way you stay cool on a hot day is just get wet. Yeah. So either that's a wet hiker or an old miner, I'm not sure what. Yeah. And Flip, by this time, she had this pain in her groin and hip area, so these are the exercises she was trying to do to keep herself on the trail. And just, it wasn't all burnt like this, but there was a lot of burn. So hot it cracked the rocks. And yeah, but there was beauty in it. You could see a lot more. There was better cell coverage. We'd actually hiked through this the year before on the training hike, but it's not the same anymore. That's the halfway point. And we'd lost a lot of weight by then. We stayed with some friends the night that we got here, and we weighed, they said the scale worked, and I weighed 129 and a half pounds. And when I was in high school, I wrestled 130 pounds. So, yeah. And that's Lassen National Park. Yeah, and that's not fire, that's geysers that we walked by in Lassen. And we saw our first bear. You can keep going as we were going through Lassen. This is the guy that does trail magic. So the AZT is Arizona Trail. So he learned about the Pacific Crest Trail, and he sets up the spot, and he has sodas and snacks. He's just this amazing guy. He makes this really welcoming place for hikers. And there's Mount Shasta in the distance. Shasta, you see that for weeks and weeks of hiking. This is actually Lassen again. And it wasn't just Flip that had trouble with her feet. This is a young woman from Germany, Foamy, and she's sitting down taking care of her feet. She would have been all the way into Oregon by now, but she had to take so much time off the trail. Her feet were bothering her. By this time, she realized she wasn't going to reach Canada because her visa was going to run out. Yeah, it was hard. And then we got to Bernie, California, and this Assembly of God church opened up their rec room. They're right by the trail, and they welcome all these hikers. And it was so amazing. There was shower facilities and a kitchen, and it was such a blessing to so many people. Here's Mount Shasta again. We see Shasta so often. The PCT obstacle course. And Yeah, Shasta again. And there's a lot of Shasta pictures we didn't take. We'll skip over that one. This is I rolled that log off the trail. So, yeah, I wanted to say, if you want to see these photos with captions, I've done captions all the way almost, well, past this spot. So stop by and give us your email address, and we can send it, and then you can see a lot more and learn a lot more than you are tonight, just viewing where we came from. This was some folks from Slovakia that we made friends with, and they made this heart along the trail. And, yeah, this is me singing a song. You'll have to get our email address to listen to that song. And this is Castle Crags that you drive by on I-5, looking at it from the trail. This is the 1,500-mile marker right before we get to I-5. And now starting out from Dunsmuir, hiking up towards Castle Crags. We loved hiking through oak trees. And this is wild azalea. And, yeah, this one, you have to hike there to smell it. The fragrance of these is just incredible. Looking back at Castle Crags, this is a campsite. Yeah, beautiful spot. And then I sing the. Yeah, so this is a song, Climb the Mountain. And by this time, Flip's athlete's feet had come back, and I didn't know it, but the ointment she had and the powder she left in the hiker box. That's when you get to a town, people had stuff they didn't need, and they just leave it for other hikers. And it's like, Flip, you're going to need that again at some point, but she didn't want the weight, and she just left it. And we got to Dunsmuir, and there was no ointment or powder for sale in Shasta City, so she's really hurting, and she's trying to air her feet out. This is Lewisia, an amazing native plant. And then so this shadow is foretelling. The next one, we're separated a little bit. And when we get to Etna, up above Wairika, Flip's going to go off the trail for 5 days. This is Darlingtonia. This is a pitcher plant. And this was taken, we still had our headlamps on, but my camera liked to take pictures in the early morning. Yeah, this is sedum or stonecrop, and this is another type of Lewisia. And the 1,600-mile mark now, that's just right after Etna Summit, so now I'm hiking by myself for 5 days. So just a single shadow. And those of you that got our emails, and I talked about this guy named 5KJ that met Flip at a McDonald's in Wairika while she was catching a bus to get to Ashland. 5KJ had given Flip this ointment. It was just this amazing coincidence. You know, like there's powers bigger than us watching out for us. Yeah, another flower in the, I forget the name of that wilderness area. And this is butterflies on the salt on the guy's straps. These butterflies are just thick getting the salt on his pack. And these are Lilium columbianum, the Cascade lily, and these are super fragrant also. And this is the California-Oregon border. I was there all by myself, but it was pretty special to be there. It took me exactly 4 months to hike all of California. And then Flip rejoined me again at Ashland, and we're crossing I-5 there, right at the summit. And it says the Canadian border is 800 and something miles. And Flip's like, I can do it. I'm going to get there. Yeah. And then we met mosquitoes. And so, yeah, once you got into Oregon, the mosquitoes got bad. And we met this young woman. And those of you who know our middle daughter, Meadow, looks almost like, in fact, when Flip first saw Mady coming up the trail, she's from the Netherlands. She goes, I'm staring at you because you look just like our daughter, Meadow. And so we ended up hiking with her and became good friends with her. Here we are at Crater Lake. Yeah, so beautiful. And shadows together at Crater Lake. And then now this is Mount Thielsen and the Three Sisters in the background there. And this is an example of trail magic. This guy had hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, and he lives in Lapine, and he was camping there for the weekend. He brought sodas and all kinds of goodies and just right there parked along the trail to let hikers have a break and share stories with each other. And Flip's doctoring her feet right at the base of Mount Thielsen. Mady had some special bandages that really helped her. But by the time we got to Shelter Cove at Odell Lake, Flip knew she had to go off the trail again. And so she was going to meet me. But Mady and I hiked together all the way to Highway 20 at my sister's. Saw some pretty country. This is Obsidian Falls. Some of you have probably been there. It was so amazing seeing all the broken obsidian where the tribal people have been collecting that for hundreds, thousands of years. And then that's Mount Washington, Three Finger Jack, and then Mount Jefferson. It was starting to get smoky then. And Mady and I together. And then this is some of the blowdowns that we had to make our way through. Yeah, and then just these amazing, hiking through the lava was so incredible. Hiked through a bunch of lava there. That's right when it got really hot right at the very end of July. This is, we camped right by McKenzie Pass, and we started out really early in the morning to avoid the heat. And 2,000 mile marker is right before the trail crosses by at Highway 20. And then this is Peter Idema. He lives in Corvallis area, Soap Creek, and he hosted me and Mady for a night or 2 nights at he has a spot in Sisters. Then he took Mady. Mady went down to Eugene, and she got off the trail there. And he hiked up with me a ways. And then this is hiking through Jefferson Park area. It's such a beautiful spot. Lanny hiked up there with Flip and I in our Daughter Meadow a number of years ago. And this is looking towards Mount Hood, so the what's the fire? Lion's Head fire burnt through all of this area. And this is looking as I'm approaching Alali Lake, but looking back towards Mount Jefferson. It just torched all of the forest there. And I saw lots of elk tracks through there, and I saw a cougar track through there. And this is the fourth bear that I saw. I saw 2 bears. Flip and I saw 2 bears in Oregon, in California, and 2 in Oregon, and 1 in Washington. This is called Little Crater Lake. It's right near Timothy Lake in Oregon. And this is Ramona Falls. So at this point, Flip is back on the trail with me again at Timberline Lodge. She got back on the trail with me. And this is Tunnel Falls in Eagle Creek. And this is Goltec. This is our son-in-law's brother, and so he's the one that got me starting to hike the Pacific Crest Trail back in 2019 doing section hikes. And here we are at Cascade Locks at the Bridge of the Gods, and so this is where Flip got off the trail for good. And then I still had 506 miles of Washington to do. So it took me 3 weeks and 2 days to do Oregon. I did three days off the trail in Oregon, and then in Washington, I didn't do any days. I didn't take any 0 days. I walked 600 miles from Sisters to here without taking a day off the trail. There were days where I'd get a resupply and I didn't walk full days, but I averaged, for the Washington border, I averaged more than 20.2 miles a day. And some of those days I just walked 3 miles, so several days were 28-mile days that I was walking. That's Mount Baker. I had some amazing, and this is right by, as I'm approaching what's called Goat Rocks Wilderness. It was so incredibly beautiful. There's a guy that does, he calls himself Miles for Moment. He hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, and he's a professional photographer, and he set himself up along the trail and took this photo of me. Flip back that one up, Flip. I'm carrying a feather. I found that on the road walk at Sierra City, and I carried that feather with me and left it at the border when I got to Canada. It wasn't as good a shape by the time I got to Canada. And that's looking at Mount Rainier from where I camped right by Eagle at Goat Rocks in the early morning, somebody walking up. And then this is the trail. This is called the Knife Edge, and the trail goes along this. Fortunately, the wind wasn't blowing the day I was there. They say sometimes it does. It was pretty amazing. This is a video, and let's do it with sound so you can hear the sound of the incredibly trail going. There's some people standing right at the top there. Yeah. And this is so the trail crossed by here, but I went up to the top of this peak and came down here. There was a few people that didn't realize you shouldn't come this way because the snow was so bad and it's in the shadows. And I talked to a young woman that walked there, and she said she was scared to death, and she just had to go on her rear end and scoot across because she thought she was going to slip down. And then this is in Snoqualmie Pass, and you can see how many resupply boxes there are. So there's a lot more people coming behind me, and most of these people didn't make the entire trail because the trail got closed because of fires before. It closed 2 days after I got to the Canadian border. And I didn't mention when we got to northern Oregon, fires had started in Northern California. So we never got stopped by fires, but all these people that were behind us had to bump up. And so in the Timberline Lodge, Cascade Locks, there were just hundreds of people on the trail because there was all these people that had bumped up, and then there were people that hiked southbound from Canada, and there was so much snow in Canada, they had to start hiking lower down, so it was really crowded with hikers. Yeah, I was hiking with that gal named Super New, and so she got a picture of me on what's called the catwalk. Yeah. And that's the 2,400 mile marker, and the total trail is 2,653 miles, so we're getting close to the end. One of the pretty lakes we passed by, and another shot with fireweed above it. Yeah. And actually we passed a bunch of places like this snow where it was so foggy you couldn't see the drop off down below you. And this picture is not a couple pictures imposed on one another. This is reflection of the water. You just have to study it a long time to figure this thing out. It was pretty amazing. And then there were fires. This one was far enough east of the trail that it didn't bother. It started by lightning. A couple more pictures that show that there's the fires again off there. And the fires again right here. And there was a lightning storm the next day that I saw the fire start from that, and I don't have a picture of it, but there was a guy, here we are 100 miles away from the end of the trail, and a guy from Puerto Rico tripped on a rock, fell off the trail, it was super steep, fell onto a fallen log and broke his ankle, and a helicopter came and plucked him off the side of the mountain. It was pretty amazing to watch this helicopter come and drop these guys down and pick him up. Yeah, and this is called Glacier Peak, a really remote and rugged area with a lot of bears. And that's the day I'd used my umbrella right before that. There's like 10 pictures of this rainbow that's going straight up out of this mountain. It's so amazing. And a bunch more butterflies by a little water seep, multicolored butterflies. And this was an avalanche. The trail, you just had to go over the top of all this stuff where an avalanche had crossed the trail. And I sing a song here. It's a meditation.
Hiker's song.
I rise today, grateful for the day. So
As I...
that video. And some of the glacial valleys up near the end of the trail. And then we got to play the video. This is
I've
when
been
I'll set
waiting.
this up a little bit.
I've been
I had
waiting
started singing songs
to
to people as I walked
see
along the
you.
trail, and this song came to me that I knew this is what I was going to sing because it was such a hard hike, and I'm thinking of Flip, and I'm thinking of all these other hikers that have done what they've done, and so I got to the end, and I knew there would be some people that they're off to the left, and I said, will somebody take my camera and take a video of me? And they had an idea I might sing, so they said, can we use our camera too? And so they ended up posting this on their Instagram page, and somebody saw it on their page that has 4.4 million followers, and over a weekend, about a month ago, millions of people all around the world saw this old man singing this song.
For a long time I've been walking I've been walking such a long way, such a long way, just to be here, just to be here. I crossed deserts, I walked rivers, I climbed mountains, just to see you, just to be here.
Wow, that's awesome. Congratulations.
I've been.
The gal that said, wow, she had just been proposed to by her boyfriend. So she's pretty emotional already. Yeah, so this was a pretty significant place. And then, like I said, 2 days later, the trail got closed because of fires. And so there were a bunch of people that just didn't make it. So I felt very fortunate. This was on August 30th that I got to the trail. And then this is the Canadian border, but we couldn't walk into Canada. We had to walk 30 miles back to Hart's Pass. But that meant that everybody who got to the border before us was hiking back, so we saw people we hadn't seen in a long time, thought we'd never see again, and then as we walked back, we got to see people that we never thought we'd see. So I sang a lot to people as I was walking back. Yeah, and there's my feather right there. Yeah. And that's, wait, let's go back. And so there's actually, yeah, if you can go back one more, two more. That is the border right there. So there's a swath of trees that's cut all the way and all the way back to the east as well. That's the Canadian border. And there was people that when the fire trapped them, there were 20 people that got trapped by the fire. The Forest Service said, well, I'm going to get a radio call any minute, but if you're fast, go ahead. And so people went, and then the fire moved faster than he thought, and they couldn't get back. And then a Canadian helicopter landed and said, there's a fire north of you. You can't stay here. I'm going to radio ahead. You guys go into Canada, even though it's illegal. It'll be okay. And so they hiked in the night, could see fire, and the guy was true to his word. They didn't get in trouble, and they were able to cross back into the States. Yeah. And then there's a few more pictures just finishing up the hike. So I camped 6 miles, 8 miles back from the border on top of the highest point of the PCT in Washington. The Slovakian couple is right on top of this point. They had supper here. And this is not the fire that closed the trail. There were 4 different fires burning that were in view right there. And then this is my campsite up on top, and you can see the smoke off there. And the sunrise the next morning. So now I've got 20 miles to hike out, and I stopped and ate huckleberries. I finally had time. I was just like a bear, and I sat on the huckleberries and ate huckleberries. There was a little bit of a thunderstorm, and it started yet another fire. So I got this one reported on my way out. And then these are some friends that I made. Base Camp and Yeti, obviously they go together, Yeti legs, and this guy is Tumbleweed, and we were all good friends. And then this is the last photo. This is Yannicka from Estonia that Flip and I gave her a ride to Portland, so she had to bump forward, so she went back to finish what she missed on the fires. And this couple was from the Netherlands. She was Matey's best friend, and I just met her that morning, so it was fun. You could tell I hadn't had a bath in 2 weeks. And the next thing I was going to do was eat a bunch of food. So that's it. So if you want to stay a little longer, maybe we can turn the lights on. And Flip, you want to come up and we can answer questions together. And so that's this map. If you want to come and look at it afterwards, it shows the entire Pacific Crest Trail. This was a gift to us. The night before we left to head to California, we got a phone call, and John and Mary Carpenter drove up to our house and gave this to us. So pretty special. This is my fifth pair that I wore, and they're full of holes. So, but everybody went through like 5 pairs of shoes. People were wearing really lightweight shoes. Yeah, I'm going to let you talk because I'm going to look at people.
Oh, okay. So there's some places where you actually have coverage, and apparently they did. Is that how you would answer it?
Well, or they use the Garmin device.
Oh, right. So the Garmin device had an SOS thing that you then can talk to someone in Garmin, and they have the numbers you have prepared and send it forward. So that little GPS thing John always had on him. So, good question. Yeah, well, we both had phones, so we each had a little battery pack, but I didn't use mine, and John did, so we did that. And when we noticed that other people were using solar panels on their backpack, and so we've got one of those, but we didn't really use it so much because by that point we were in trees, and it just didn't charge up very much. But we would do it on supply, so every time we dropped down into a town to eat and get a shower and stuff, then we'd charge up everything.
So we carried 2 battery packs with us, and so we had to charge the phone, we had to charge our headlamps, and one other thing we charged. The battery packs, and the Garmin device, And occasionally the Garmin device would go out, and we wouldn't notice it, so we'd get texts from people saying. Or there was a time when we were hiking an alternate route, and my brother texted me. There was a spot we had cell coverage, and he said, "You're off the trail. It's to the east of you."
But people also knew we were eating lunch. It was crazy. Okay. Yeah, well, John, just to keep me in the game, carried my food weight. I only had to carry 1 day at a time, but my pack was, they called base weight, so I think mine was, what was it, like 16 and a half, so I never went above 30. So, so that the base weight is without any food and water. And so it just depends on, where you are on the trip. If you have 9 days of food, then you're going to have a heavier pack. If it's like 22 miles between water spots, then you'd have to carry a lot of water. So it just varied all the time. And the goal was to not only have what you need. And so there were, so if you knew you were going to, in the Sierras, water runs on top of the land. Kanic area of Oregon, it all disappears into the lava and goes into these deep places. So you just have all the water you need in the Sierras, and you don't have to have a lot of carrying it. But as soon as you hit Oregon, it's, oh my, it's 22 miles this one, and on you go.
And Southern California had plenty of water carries also. And there are some texts here that just disappeared. Somebody wanted to know about shoes, which we kind of answered. Looks like Flip is wearing